I've spoken a lot about the drug hydroxychloroquine in the past and the possibility it could treat coronavirus symptoms or even prevent infection. On my programs and other programs here on Sky, we've interviewed doctors, professors, researchers, pharmacists, a whole range of people about this drug because it could hardly be more interesting and pertinent, and facts should be our friends. But many in the media only see politics, and particularly the politics of Donald Trump.
A lot of good things have come out about the hydroxy. A lot of good things have come out. And you'd be surprised at how many people are taking it, especially the frontline workers, before you catch it. The frontline workers, many are taking it. I happen to be taking it.
Hydroxychloroquine?
I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine.
When?
Right now, yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I started taking it.
Sunrise GP, Dr Ginny Mansberg is here. Morning to you, Jen. Should everyone just stop taking this? I mean, should the President be not taking this?
Well, I don't know who advised the President to take it. That seems extremely bizarre. We had never thought that it was going to prevent COVID. It was always going to be a treatment.
The US President Donald Trump has revealed he's taking the anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine. He's been praising the drug since the early days of the pandemic, despite there being little clinical evidence.
Doctors and medical experts expressed alarm at the President's announcement.
For now, the disappointing news for some media boosters that a drug touted as a potential cure or treatment for COVID-19 does not appear to work and can have serious side effects. And Trump's media mates at Fox News have been equally enthusiastic about the drug's potential.
We're talking about hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine. But it's not just in America that the drug has had its cheer squad. Warned the treatment had not been properly tested and might be unsafe, Sky News in Australia jumped to the President's defence, citing Trump derangement syndrome.
The malaria drug the US President Donald Trump has been spruiking as a game changer for treating coronavirus has showed no benefit in a large analysis of its use.
And while he was just trying to project hope, his relentless promotion of the drug has had unintended consequences.
You get the picture. Trump spruiks the drug, so journalists have to talk it down. So imagine their horror when they finally caught up with more news of more studies, serious clinical trials, even in our own nation.
Australian researchers are preparing to trial an anti-malaria drug on health workers. Hydroxychloroquine has been touted as a possible prevention or treatment for COVID-19, but there are also warnings it can be dangerous.
How do you feel, Mark, when you hear Trump talking about it? Is there a chance here he's going to have the last laugh?
Yeah, imagine their horror. There seem to be plenty in the media who hope the drug doesn't work to prove Trump wrong. Get your head around that. Gemma Tognini, it's fascinating to watch this, isn't it? I mean, I hope the drug works. I hope Trump's right, but I'll leave it up to the clinical trials to decide.
Do you remember when he was first elected earlier on in his term and there was that saying going around that if Donald Trump cured cancer, he'd be criticised for putting doctors out of work? Well, this is sort of a variation on that theme. I mean, I've no horse in the race. I've no view on him as a president, but this is a classic example of inherent bias in the coverage of the story because we've seen, even I was looking at a White House press briefing at the end of last week where there was significant evidence offered around the effectiveness of this drug and the clinical uses of this drug. But, you know, rather than suffering from the Trump derangement syndrome, rather than actually saying that there is some sort of clinical impetus for this drug to be considered, it's almost like a disappointment. Oh, what a shame that he might not be off his rocker. What a shame that there may have been some veracity. And, you know, the broader picture around that, Chris, is it comes back to this constant issue of lack of trust in the media. I mean, we don't need another reason to understand why people distrust the media in this day and age. More than ever, we need to reverse that.
Yeah, we just ought to be interested in what doctors are saying about this and what the trials are showing, Jack. And early on, there were a number of doctors, and I ran some interviews with some of them, and they were saying that this drug had a pretty good effect if they prescribed it early. It kept people away from hospital. They didn't get very bad illness out of the coronavirus infection. I think what we've seen as time goes on, of course, is that is true of the case of just about everybody who gets coronavirus, drug or no drug. So that may have steered them awry. But there's enough interest for clinical trials to be conducted right around the world.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very much in your camp in this topic as well. I very much hope that the drug does help. I hope that it helps from both a preventative measure and a treatment point of view. But I do think that you've got to be a little bit critical of the way that he's been spruiking it, because he could have walked away from this crisis with an approval rating akin to Scott Morrison, who's, at 63%, overwhelming bump like most Western leaders. Now, whether he's right or wrong, I think he's left himself a bit vulnerable for the way he's selling his message.
Oh, it's typical Trump. I mean, he's contradictory. He flies off at the mouth with all sorts of ideas, and just to sit there and spring on everyone that he's taking hydroxychloroquine is more honesty than most people would normally advise. But it is fascinating, Chris Mitchell, because he could have done well out of the crisis, although his latest approval ratings are quite high. But what I've found fascinating is, of course, that New York State is the epicentre of the pandemic in the US, and it has been a disaster. There's lots of reasons why New York City might always be the most vulnerable, one of the most vulnerable cities in the world to this sort of thing. But it's extraordinary to watch the media coverage of Trump being blamed for that, while the governor, the Democrat governor, Andrew Cuomo, is lauded.
Well, I think the position in New York was very similar to the position in Milan, wasn't it? That the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, had a hug of Chinese to show that we didn't see coronavirus as a race thing. And of course, all through the Chinese New Year celebrations in New York, the virus was racing around there as it was in Milan. On your point about hydroxy, I'd just say I think the first interviews with researchers at Walter and Eliza were done on this 8 weeks ago. And there's no sign the ABC even knew that 2,000 doctors and nurses had volunteered for this trial. And they're mixing up constantly the use of the drug as a preventative with the use of the drug as a treatment for people who are severely ill.
But that's the extraordinary thing, Chris. I mean, I've been reading on this, as we all have, over the past few months, and there was literature around months ago, that there was a prospect of this to treat symptoms and as a prophylactic to stop people getting the disease. And the publication that there were going to be these clinical trials in Australia, that was that was on the public record at least 6 or 8 weeks ago. And they've only reported it now because it's actually happened. But we were talking about this stuff months ago. Jack, I was talking to Professor Peter Doherty, no less, at least 6 weeks ago on this stuff. They've just seemed to have been incurious about it, except as a political weapon to bash Trump, as if you need any more of those.
I think it goes back to Gemma's point where, you know, if Trump says that something is good, then it automatically has to be bad. And he can be quite clever about that as a tactic. He can actually use that in arguments by going behind something that's really hard to argue against. Then all of a sudden the left and the Twitter sphere, they're up in arms about it, which is pretty much our entire media contingent nowadays.
Indeed.